Hey folks, welcome in. I'm Kelly Coleffel with Fivetran. We have an incredibly special roundtable discussion for you today. Everyone across the industry, I think, is looking for ways to do more with less. You hear it over and over and over. How do I provide more innovation, more incredible, creative ways to use data in my data program with the data products and services I'm delivering, but with an eye towards lowering my overall cost, keeping my expenses down? It's a huge challenge. Data workloads are expanding across all platforms, and every business unit is constantly demanding more. Today, we've got a panel discussion for you. We've got some incredible data industry leaders. They're going to share their perspectives on migrating to the Snowflake Data Cloud. They're going to talk about their strategies, their approaches, ways to minimize costs in your data program, but also leveraging incredible innovation. So, joining me today, got in three incredible panelists. Zach Shepard. Zach is Director of Engineering for Data at Business Insider. They're a New York City-based multinational financial and business news website founded in 2007. Second, Teresa Kovic. Teresa is principal consultant at DAS42. DAS42 is a cloud-based data and analytics consulting and professional services firm. And then third, we have Garrett Long. Garrett is director of product marketing at Snowflake. Through the Snowflake Data Cloud, they enable a range of data workloads and data outcomes. And I really appreciate everybody joining me today. I am looking forward to hearing your perspectives, stories, and insights. Innovation is defining data programs today, but we just cannot get away from this cost optimization lever. It's always there all the time. Garrett, why don't you kick things off with your perspective on who is Snowflake today? Growth has been incredible over the past several years, and then also touch on some of the differences between Snowflake and other cloud data platforms and what might cause a customer to migrate to the Snowflake Data Cloud.
Sure. Happy to do it, Kelly. Thanks a lot for being here, and I'm excited to talk to everybody today. Yeah, I'm fortunate enough to be at Snowflake. It's a wonderful company actually to work for, and really Snowflake enables the data cloud, as you mentioned. And I think that the original kind of thesis behind Snowflake was this idea of separating compute and storage and making kind of this the easy button for our ecosystem, right? And eliminating those data silos was really at the core of what we wanted to do as a company about 10 years ago. And the evolution has been amazing. And today, where we see ourselves playing very strongly is helping companies simplify their data foundation, right? We like to say there is no AI strategy without a data strategy. So starting there, we're trying to spend a lot of time and energy accelerating AI projects for our customers. You can see that through many of the announcements we've made over the last year and a half. And finally, helping scale that work with applications, right? So Snowflake native applications is where we think a lot of places are going to land in terms of bringing that work to the data, as opposed to the models that were there, several years ago. And really, it's all enabled by the data cloud, right? So the idea that we would make this easy for organizations of every size has been a maniacal focus for the company. We've reached nearly 9,000 customers and also have, I think, 2,300 or more kind of listings in our marketplace now between data sets and native apps. So it's really been a powerful journey for the company. And obviously, a lot of people are aware of us. But I think really the core of it comes, the core of our differentiation and how we've helped companies achieve goals, and I'm sure Zach's going to talk a lot about this later, is through our architecture, right? So when you start with that simple idea of separating compute and storage, you surround that idea with, elastic multi-cluster computing. Any cloud, any workload is the idea, and bringing then around that cloud services, right? So what we really want to do is remove as many buttons as possible. That's the DNA of Snowflake, right? Is to take buttons away in many ways, and then make that all work seamlessly cross cloud and cross region, right? So at the core of it, that's who we are as a company. And you asked an interesting question about how we are different from other folks, and I think what I'll do is I'll focus a lot on how we see ourselves kind of differentiated from our customer base, the things we hear time and again that make us different. I'll start there and then dig in a little bit to some details. But the top level things we usually hear are, of course, ease of use for Snowflake. This is what we do. We provide a single unified engine for all the workloads that a company might want to run. This goes from like traditional data warehousing through data lake, now all the way up to ML and AI projects. And we surround that with effectively seamless governance, right? So we are not requiring data to move. We don't have an explosion of policies on how to control access to data. And all that winds up leading to a great total cost of ownership. So the Snowflake model is consumption based, as everybody out there probably knows. And what we're worried about most is providing best price to performance. So you'll see that through initiatives on the Snowflake side, like our Snowflake Performance Index. We are now publicly, publishing an index to show how underneath the covers we are helping improve performance, which leads directly to cost benefits to our customer without having them to do a single thing, a single optimization. And I know we're going to talk about optimization later. So that's at a high level, how we think about ourselves and actually how I think about Snowflake. And so, when I think about differences, I think in particular, this was a discussion with Google. I mean, the history of this is clear. BigQuery is a product out there in the marketplace, but that tool was really born out of an internal project at Google. The original tool was called Dremel. It was an internal tool used by experts to do a certain thing. And BigQuery came out of that as a way to approach a more non-expert kind of community. But I don't think it started from the same base place, which was how do we take separation of compute and storage and scale that out to a very large kind of application. And so, just a couple of places where I think we really shine is like in data collaboration, because we took that first step and made that choice to be cross-region, cross-cloud with ease. What you'll see is you'll never have to move or copy data to do a data sharing project in Snowflake, right? There is no concept of taking a data set and like Zach has to give it to that person across the aisle, right? That is something that's been eliminated from our stack, which I think really differentiates us from other providers in the space. And that sharing inherits that governance profile that you've defined, right? So I don't have to approach a new sharing methodology each and every time. I think another place is in multi-language, right? So we started out, people know us as an SQL warehouse, but over the last several years, we've introduced Snowpark and now Cortex, which we can talk about more. But this allows users to bring a multi-language approach directly into the data cloud, right? So you can bring in Python, Java, Scala with no effort, no extra tools to connect. I think this is all about management, right? When you look at something like BigQuery, you do need to think about bringing in Cloud Data Proc if you want second language kind of capability, which creates management complexity, right? We have to pass IAM roles. We have to pass lots of policies between tools, and that's where the explosion of complexity can come from. So we've really focused on maintaining that easy button mentality while expanding across the space. So I think for me, that's kind of in a nutshell where we're coming from as a company. And you asked the last question, which was, why do people migrate to the data cloud? Why do they pick Snowflake? I think Zach's going to tell his story, and I think his story is pretty representative of many journeys out there. But I see people looking for better TCO, a scalable, easy to use platform, right? The future is like, just think about what an LLM interface is now supposed to be, the easy button for querying data, right? It's just type a question in natural language. I mean, Snowflake embodies that throughout the entire data and analytics stack. And I think that's where we're going to see the discussion go today.
I love that. I thinking back when I got introduced to Snowflake, and it was this it just works type of approach that was so different from what myself and the other colleagues at the firm that I was with at the time had experienced. Great background to get us kicked off, Garrett. Zach, let me ask you, I did just a touch on Business Insider getting us kicked off. Who's Business Insider today, if people aren't familiar? And then I'd really like to hear from you, your data stack, other technology changes maybe you had to facilitate as you were making this move to Snowflake. Get us rolling there.
Sure, thanks. I mean, Business Insider is a pretty well-known journalism site focused on business technology. We have had more focus on entertainment and lifestyle, which we're moving away from, but really trying to be very focused these days on the business and technology space. And our data stack has been evolving a little bit. It was pretty much just BigQuery and Looker with a lot of custom code written around it and a very difficult warehouse posture to work on. And now we have really focused on Fivetran, Airflow. We've brought in DBT. That was the biggest change, I think, with Snowflake. Sort of operationally, DBT made a huge difference there, and that's been a big part of the solution for us. And then we're still using Looker as our business intelligence layer. We are really relying on Google Analytics data, and that's a part of like the whole Google ecosystem, which has some challenges to it. We have a lot of internal data sources. We've got a big subscriptions business, which some third-party data involved there. And then on the advertising side, obviously, Google Ad Manager is a big part of that. And so that's some of the complexity that we're trying to negotiate there is, with a couple of Google products that integrate very tightly into BigQuery, there's a process that we have to go through, and it kind of leads us into like, oh, we still need to use BigQuery for very specific use cases. But what we found is that Snowflake really delivers a lot more value for us in terms of productivity and solving some of the problems that Garrett was just describing.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, Garrett talked about what you mentioned, which is any data, any workload. Teresa, any thoughts on that with what you've seen working with Business Insider and really contributing to what they're trying to do over there as part of their data program?
Yeah, I think, when we were working with Business Insider in this migration, one of the things that we were really able to see is we were able to take the infrastructure that Zach and team were already using, looking at DBT, looking at Airflow, looking at Fivetran, and the other pieces of the puzzle were pretty much able to stay the same. So I think that was something that was really beneficial to us. There was already a strong infrastructure. It didn't require sort of rethinking the whole solution, re-architecting, changing these, adjacent or supporting tools. We were just able to, sort of flip from one endpoint to another.
I love it when you don't have to make these wholesale rip and replace changes and things plug together easy. Teresa, let me stay with you. You have a tremendous amount of experience assisting clients like Business Insider with migrations. Not everybody may know DOS 42. Give us a little bit of a sense for who DOS 42 is today. And then secondly, if I'm an organization that's out there, I'm considering how I want to migrate to Snowflake, what should I consider? What should I prioritize when I'm planning that out?
All right. Yeah. So DOS 42, like you said at the top, is a data consultancy. We're focused on cloud-based technologies. We drive smart, comprehensive, business-first growth and data strategy for our clients. And our clients have included giants in multiple industries. So some of our very recognizable clients, Walmart, Uber, Johnson & Johnson, Business Insider, obviously, but also smaller businesses with targeted needs. I worked with the National Marrow Donor Program for several years. We've worked with PopSockets and Slack. Some of our specialties, like we said, are Snowflake migrations, including BigQuery to Snowflake, launching and supporting data needs for streaming and subscription-based platforms and services using our subscriber analytics solution, and then helping stitch together the sort of tapestry of the telecommunications landscape with providers that you're almost certainly using today, whether you know it or not. One of the things that differentiates us is we engage end-to-end across the data ecosystem. So every member of our team is trained and empowered to engage across all layers of your data ecosystem. So that gives greater efficiency, scale, and flexibility to help transform organizations for that long-term success. Just a little bit of history. We've been enabling clients to make the most of their cloud-native technology since 2015. We've been Snowflake Elite Partner since 2020, and we're the only boutique consultancy that achieves that standing. And we're a past winner of Snowflake's America's Innovation Award. So that's just a little bit about DOS 42. Now, I want to talk about some of the key things that we think are really important for people to pay attention to when they're doing these migrations. So the first and probably the most obvious question is your strategy, are you trying to sort of lift and shift, or are you looking at this point in time that you're at in your data journey as, you're going to move data warehouses, since you're going to do this major thing, you are thinking about re-architecting, and maybe you're doing this because of a changing strategy underlying. So obviously that, what approach you have there is going to have a huge difference about just the way that you approach everything about the migration. you want to evaluate where your position is with data maturity. So one of the things that DOS42 offers to our clients and to anyone for free on our website is a data maturity quiz to sort of help you see, this is where I am on the curve, on the, in the sort of the pyramid, the hierarchy of needs, we call it, and see what's the next step for me. Am I doing all of the things that support the step that I'm doing? We do see a lot of people trying to get to, ML and AI applications, but maybe they don't have, solid governance yet, or, they're not doing some of the things that lead up to that. And so helping clients to see that full picture and see, like, these are all of the steps that you need to do as you're reaching towards this sort of, next level work. I think as you're looking at the Snowflake Data Cloud, considering some of the new features that you're going to be able to take advantage of, that you might not be thinking of, particularly if you're doing a lift and shift approach, don't just lift and shift. Think about, are there things that you can do with the Snowflake Marketplace, with data clean rooms, with multi-cloud data sharing, like we've talked about. So, things that might just be net adds, even if you are taking a more lift and shift approach with the data itself. Some of the security considerations, Snowflake has built-in role-based access control, masking and governance features. And we'll talk a little bit later about some of the different optimization techniques that you might be using. Then I think assessing your adjacent tools and processes. So, like we talked about with Zach, you don't necessarily have to completely change everything, but think about what cloud are you using right now? What are your ingestion and orchestration tools, your CI/CD tools? What do you have in place for data quality and governance? Where are your code repositories? And then I think one of the things that gets really tricky that we might or might not also have time to talk about later is if you're using a primarily Google Cloud and you have Google data sources like Google Analytics 4, for example, that can make it pretty tricky to move off of BigQuery, because Google really wants you to be using BigQuery for that. And if you need the full granularity data, that's the way that Google will share full granularity Google Analytics data with you. On the other hand, you can craft a strategy where you're using some level of pre-aggregated data. I know Insider has a 5-tran connector that gets that pre-aggregated data as well. But just one of the considerations, one of the things that can be sort of tricky about the migration there is if you do have some pretty big Google-based data sources.
Really good, Teresa. Yeah, I mean, you shared some incredible wisdom there. I love the fact that you talked about what I took from is I need some foundational pieces in place, regardless of where I start, lift and shift or full modernize. And that whole, an honest assessment of data maturity as well goes into it. And Zach, I'm not going to ask you to rate your data maturity as an organization, but I am interested in, Teresa talked about some of the tricky parts of doing this. What do you feel like was the trickiest part of the migration overall?
Yeah, and I wanted to say that Teresa was being a bit kind there. To be honest, when she joined us, I'm not sure we were as far along as she said, but I think that it was a big part of our move to Snowflake is evaluating our data maturity. And a part of the challenge that we faced was, our BigQuery does make itself very easy for a bunch of data to sort of show up there, right? And you don't know where it's coming from or why it's there. Especially when I started in this role, we didn't really have that formal structure, and to build that out took a lot of effort. And frankly, it wasn't possible in the BigQuery presence that we had. And moving to Snowflake was a great opportunity for us to assess our foundation, decide it was rotten, and build a whole new one. Now, that was a big lift and something that, we didn't necessarily get right the first time. By the time that Teresa we started working together, I think that we did have a lot more sort of losses under our belt than wins, but we were in a great state for her to really help us to accelerate and get into a good position. I think that the other thing is, like, a crisis like that's an opportunity in the same sense, right? And you have to take that opportunity to do what's right. I think you were asking about sort of the challenges for us. Technically, I think that really understanding micropartitions is an important part as an engineer, and getting your head around that is, to me, the fundamental mindset shift that you need to do to be successful against a build like this. And then how to model changing data is sort of the next level up. Data sets where just going with the default setup isn't always going to pay dividends, right? So you have transient tables you need to figure out, okay, well, this is a data set that's going to change a lot. And so transient tables is always something that we talk about, and then tuning your fail-safe and recovery periods. And some of that you can do later, and some of that is much more expensive. And so really trying to get into the guts of that. We were lucky enough to engage a Snowflake, solutions architect, SME type person who was able to really help us to get our heads around, like, well, this is what a micro partition strategy is going to mean for that particular data set. Or in this case, where you're just layering on, that's fine. You could just go to the default settings. And those are really big challenges. I think, frankly, the biggest challenge is adoption, right? Like, people don't like change, and change management as an organization is the hardest thing. And so how do you bring your stakeholders along? How do you bring the analyst community to your new solution and say, hey, this is so much better? Well, they don't care if you say that. They want you to show that. And so, we use Looker. All the Looker explorers didn't have the obvious advantages because we were sort of trying to build that foundation. That's a big challenge. It's like, hey, this is a better foundation. I don't care. Pay me. Like, show me the money, right? And they don't want to have to go through the exercise of validating their dashboards again. So you have to walk with them in that process. And that, for me, was a big learning, is like, hey, every analyst group wants to be handheld in their own special way and get onboarded into this system. And then, okay, now we're at a point where the analysts are the evangelists for Snowflake. They talk about how much things are better now. That's just, battles fought and won. And you have to go through that, I think. But getting your technical strategy solid at the beginning and not trying to be too ambitious was a big thing for us. We probably took off a bigger bite than we should have in the first iteration. We came back around, we settled down. Then we started working with Teresa and DOS42. They were, just legends in terms of leveling us up in a lot of this stuff. And then now we're at a very great place where we have alerts for slow queries. We have, cost monitoring on the daily, the weekly basis. I don't have to worry about that stuff because my teams do it for us. It's a much nicer place, but a lot of that is built on, hey, get the foundation right first, then you can start to layer on. There's so much that we can do and talk about, for sure.
It's amazing when you get the foundation right, you get those core components down, how much that can impact your adoption and the overall feel within the organization for it, where you don't have that friction of, no, I'm not interested. Oh, this is really working well for me.
Yep.
Well, so Garrett, Zach talked about some really cool stuff, everything from people and process to some of the key aspects that he's leveraging that he really recommends, things like micro partitions and transient tables. Make sure you understand those going in. Interested in your thoughts. Snowflake optimization techniques and capabilities, those differ from some of the other platforms that are available out there. What's your perspective on that? And do you have any thoughts for us on it?
Yeah, for sure. And I do want to say, Zach, you brought up a great point, and Teresa echoed it as well, which is like, it's very hard to stand alone completely, right? Like in this world of data, like, look, Google Analytics is a key, undisputable source of data. So we have to figure out how to, play in these ecosystems. And like, just to give a plug to our team, in January, we have gone into preview on, connectors for Google Analytics, raw and aggregate data. So like, we see the ecosystem, we understand the pain, right? It's like, it would be ingenuous for us to say like, oh, don't use Google Analytics anymore. That doesn't make sense, right? So like, I think Snowflake as a company, you can see it in our partner ecosystem, in the marketplace. Part of the ethos is like understanding that ecosystem and the data cloud and how it operates within that system, right? So I just want to say, to the point of, we are all living together on this planet. This is the way it's going to work. And I'd be curious for Zach's take on all this on the optimization side, and Teresa too, but, we do approach it from a different way, right? Like, to some large degree, we purposefully try to take away unnecessary knobs from folks. That it can be jarring, right? So like, if you're used to tinkering and doing things like that, Snowflake is definitely a different experience. And it's great to hear like the BI team can be like all of a sudden converted, like, oh, this is a much better way to do things, right? So this is what we see time and again out there in our customer base. But when I think of us, first of all, on like just the straight compute performance side, we have a very simple approach to like that t-shirt size warehousing kind of mentality. With auto suspend and auto resumes and the ability to scale up and scale out like instantaneously, effectively. And I'm sure Zach, you can attest to this. This is literally like a less than a second that you have more compute power if you want it to be there, right?
Yep.
That's how it feels in the back end. And so I think from that point of view, having a really solid ability to match compute power, compute needs with the job at hand is I think a very interesting place where people do spend time figuring it out. And I'm sure Teresa has some probably really deep insights to share there. But let me go for maybe 2 more minutes, and then I'll hand it over. And I think the other place where we as a company are investing a lot in is in that optimization of cost. So that's what the title of this talk was about. And so when we think about us as a company, I encourage everybody that's listening in to go check out the Snowflake Performance Index. We do see in the marketplace lots of kind of benchmark comparisons, right? Like how fast can you run this workload against CPCDS, right? That's like a thing, but that's not a real workload, right? So like the SPI, the Snowflake Performance Index, is actually work we've taken internally to identify kind of standard stable workloads, see how long it takes to compute those workloads. These are like production from our customer base. And then we give ourselves action items to reduce the time it takes to perform those actions. And that SPI is just a constant maniacal focus on optimization of price performance, which we then just return to the customer, right? There is no hidden thing here. And you can see the SPI, just type in Snowflake Performance Index, you'll see we just released the second issue. So I think we help people optimize around that. And we're also giving them tools on tracking budgets and, lots of roadmap in the kind of that FinOps way. And I think the last place, and I would love to hear Zach's perspective on this, because I think it'd be interesting, is around governance. So all of this has to work in a very seamless and governed way, right? We are living now with not only privacy concerns, but just how are we going to protect and be stewards of our data estates? And so with our Horizon kind of brand of features, right, which includes everything from straight kind of role-based access, role-based protections, columns, table access, et cetera. What you really find is you've created a centralized way to define and give roles and control that data flow through the platform. And it's really like an amazing how unscaled it has to be. You don't need 10,000 policies to run a company like Business Insider, right? It's just not the way it has to work. So I think with that, like that optimization, it's like a non-standard optimization, but like that optimization, creating a data state that can then power the business, I think is another place where we really shine. So maybe I'll let Zach or Teresa react to that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we've taken advantage of there is the Terraform provider. We like to keep all of our configurations in code. We have, CI/CD for our Terraform. And so that allows us to have everyone knows what the policies are. Here's how you can change it. It's a very transparent way. And it's a way that all the engineering teams are familiar with, right? So, hey, we want to have this role. I want to get that access. Like, no, there's no backdoor. Open up a pull request. Someone will review it. We'll say yes or no. And also, I think that allows us to be much more transparent and have like a security posture that's pretty robust. I don't know, Teresa, if you had more to add on that one.
Yeah, I was actually going to go back to one of the points that Garrett made about the Snowflake Performance Index. So one of the things I want to make sure that people understand about that is an all other things equal comparison. So it's not Snowflake comes to you and says, hey, we have this new feature that you can improve your workloads by X% by this. It's literally with no change to the workloads, Snowflake has made improvements on the back end that, increase the speed, reduce the cost. And I think that's fantastic. And that's what we love to see from a partner too. One of the other things I want to call out in terms of optimization techniques that Snowflake offers that, we as implementation partners at DOS42 find really helpful is the query profiler. So being able to go in and look and see, on the back end, I won't go into great detail about describing that, but it can be really helpful and just has a really high level of transparency and easy to understand, similar, I guess, to an explain plan, but really going through and showing, we've got fan out here, there must be sort of a suboptimal join or something like that. And once you get used to that interface, it's really easy to see.
Teresa. Yeah, just to double down on that one, I have some engineers who are just obsessed with that because we do get alerts for any query that runs slow, and then they're like just diving in, and it is much like I'm old enough now to remember explains in a much less nice interface, right? And so I always get like a little bit of FOMO or jealousy about like getting into those, and I would love to still be an IC engineer some days and just get a chance to play with those tools because they're great tools for sure.
I feel like those are some of the things that you're talking about Zach, Garrett, you alluded to, and Teresa, that these are things that become very nice surprises when you implement in the Snowflake Data Cloud. Teresa, anything else that you want to call out there that maybe is unexpected? You may not know this is coming. You go, wow, that's really nice to have. I didn't know that was going to happen for me in the Snowflake Data Cloud.
Yeah, I think actually where I think of one of the biggest surprises that people encounter when they're making a migration like this is they just end up getting surprised by things in your data. Like the shift as you're moving from one place to another, even if you wanted to do a lift and shift, it's like, well, you dove deep enough. You've uncovered the beast. You've learned something that some engineer did 5 years ago that's just been happening on the back end. And so that's also going back to Zach's earlier point, why the change management is really important, that even if you're planning on doing a lift and shift, you need to set expectations with your end users, and you need to, work with them to say, okay, we might learn something new about our data through the process of going through this. That is going to take us to the next level, but it might mean that our numbers in our before and after dashboards are not 100% apples to apples, but we will be able to explain that. So I think, in addition to some of the features that we're talking about, query profiler, the way that we design warehouses differently, using search optimization in Snowflake, that some of that is what ends up being the biggest surprise to people, which can be a pleasant surprise if you're prepared for it.
From our perspective, we had a very straightforward, compelling reason to move to Snowflake in the beginning. It was costs. Finance needed a predictable cost out of our data stack. Like they just, BigQuery would go through the roof one month and maybe come down the next month, or maybe just keep going up. And, we had a really bad situation there. There's a lot of old reasons that we don't need to get into for some of that. But we went to Snowflake for that predictable cost platform. And then, since then we got into Snowpark, and we were early adopters, in Snowpark, and really got to play with some of the for a long time. And now that it's, getting more mature, we're definitely leaning into that. Our data science team is in there all the time. It's great. And then data sharing was not something I anticipated being such a big part of it, but that's really been very impactful for us. I think we have sort of 3 or 4 or 5 big projects where data sharing just chops out sprints and sprints worth of work for the team. All of a sudden, hey, we're doing discovery on the actual data. It's right there in Snowflake. There's the process there. It's a few emails, bing, bang, boom, and it's done. And so that for me has been incredible.
Sounds like I hear unlocking a lot of new capabilities with Snowflake, all these different workloads. I would anticipate too, Zach, that's kind of persisting across business units as well. Maybe word gets around a little bit. Hey, we were able to do this. Another business unit said, I'd like to do that too.
Right. Yeah, and we haven't really explored sharing data out yet, but that's definitely something that we're on the hunt for, that right use case to figure that out. We do have, the GAM data comes from BigQuery, but we have other partners where we're just able to load that straight in through data sharing. And then the ecosystem, I think we talked about, we all live in one world, right? And Fivetran has been a big part of that for us in accelerating our data ingestion. The DBT is great, but frankly, DOS42 has been the biggest up-leveler for us, and it's been a great partner in terms of making sure that the team is on the right track, and really working with Teresa and her team has been great.
It's always a balance between the people, the process, and the technology. If one of them sort of gets out of whack, it becomes really tough. Garrett, Teresa, anything else there that you'd like to talk about? And I guess, Garrett, maybe anything you've seen when you've looked at Snowflake customers, anything difference-wise that just really lights up their eyes when they're talking about Snowflake? And then I'll toss it over to Teresa as well after that.
Sure. I'll just dovetail what Zach was saying, right? I think that this idea that Snowflake is the platform, ultimately, people might have a perception of Snowflake that we were a data warehousing company. It's actually an incorrect perspective. Warehousing is one architectural pattern you can choose to build a data estate, and then business value on top of that, right? You can also choose a lake strategy or a lake house strategy. All of those things are potentially part of this ecosystem. And what I find exciting, and what I think our customers are seeing, and Zach said it, is we started with SQL and now we're using Python. we thought we were just going to power this dashboard, but instead we're predicting subscriber churn, right? And that journey, all within the same platform, all within those same governance profiles, all within the same ability to predict effectively how much this might cost us over time, right? That idea that people are now, catching up to the vision, which is the data cloud is a thing, and the platform that drives it is a platform, and we will have, I'm not sure it's the right time to talk about it now, like maybe at the end, but like our release of Cortex into preview last year, having built-in capabilities to extract information from PDF files right within the SQL. Like it's really amazing. Like LLMs in seconds, we call it, right? It's like powering insights from that way. And the journey is just unfolding. So the idea, I think the most powerful thing, I think when people get in, and Zach would love your, agree or disagree on this, is like that idea that the platform does really start to take shape, and I can just bring use cases and I can bring ideas for business value with very low friction, right? Very low friction of test, prove, deploy within the platform.
I love that. Teresa, anything else to add along those lines?
One of the things that my team has been really excited about in the last year, and we're continuing to see rollout in different platforms, backends for general availability, is building applications in Snowflake using Streamlit. So we have data quality applications that we build for clients. We've got some data exploration interfaces, executive dashboards where you can turn levers, and work with predictions and these sorts of things just straight in the interface, and that's been really exciting for us. We're really excited to see that continue to roll out availability.
Yeah, Snowflake has made Streamlit exceptionally easy to. It's a really nice tool to build apps, but having it right within Snowsight as another native app is really, really cool. Well, let me do that. I mean, we've got just a couple of minutes left. This has been fantastic. I always like to, though, end with, vision, any priorities that you have for this year. Maybe kind of have your eye on something out there that we haven't talked about yet. I'll kind of open it up to the panel. Anything that you'd like to talk about there and let folks know?
Sure. I mean, I think data clean rooms is obviously a big deal for publishers. We've got to solve that problem, and Snowflake is a great platform for that. And so I'm really thrilled to be able to sort of leverage that. Excuse me. We're also looking at more operational use cases. We primarily have been using data for analysis, and one of the things we've just started to dip our toe into is how do we activate this data? How do we make this data power user experience on the website? And Snowflake is a super interesting component of that. It's hard to see that Snowflake's the total answer there, but it's definitely, so far it's been great, and we'll continue to leverage it there. And then, Garrett mentioned Cortex. We've got a bunch of people chomping at the bit to do LLM development. Like, that's such an exciting place. And, what are the use cases, and how do we sort of sequence those and make sure we have enough resourcing and all that? But that's obviously a huge part of our roadmap and sort of solving the problems of the future.
Sounds like you've got your hands full, Zach, for sure there. Garrett, Teresa, anything else that you'd like to talk about in terms of, looking out all the way 12 months, which can be a lifetime in this industry, right?
Yeah, no, for me, I think I've already covered most of it. The journey from where we started to where we're going, and this idea of, insights in seconds, full custom LLMs in days. It's just very, very powerful. And as we all sorted out, like, what is a Copilot? What is it supposed to do? How do we really want these things to behave, right? Our role in that ecosystem is to just provide the data strategy, the data foundation. Without it, none of those things can exist. And then provide the tooling to folks and teams like Zach so that they can sort out those really powerful business priorities.
That is great. Teresa, final thoughts as you're looking to the future in the next 12 months or so with DAS 42 and the impact that you and your team are making with clients.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of cannibalized my point for this earlier. Actually, it was a lot of what we're working on right now is Streamlit applications, and seeing what sort of custom applications we can build.
Well,
no, I think we lost.
Did we lose Teresa? All right. Well, I know I know she had just talked about Streamlit. I'm a big Streamlit fan as well. Hey, this has been absolutely outstanding. I will wrap it up by just saying a sincere thank you to each one of you for being a part of this panel discussion. And on migrating to the Snowflake Data Cloud, I really appreciate each one of you sharing your stories, challenges, learnings, and a lot of great advice as we go into this year related to not only cost optimization, but innovation. What should we have our eye on today? So a huge thank you to everyone for taking time to join us. I hope that what Zach, Teresa, and Garrett all shared will help you accelerate your own data journey. Zach, Teresa, Garrett, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate this.
Yeah, thanks very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Wow.